There's Craig.
Hey there, how's it going? Welcome everybody. If you have questions, please type them in the chat window. We can't hear you, but hopefully you can hear us. And we'll be getting started here in just a little bit. All right, we've got 45 attendees. What time did you want to get started, Leah?
Let's go ahead.
Okay. So welcome to LouMug, everyone. This is our first time doing a Teams live LouMug event. So thanks everyone for joining. We thought we could all get away and still keep LouMug going and do some good learning. Obviously lunch is on your own today, so hopefully you're having something good. We will, however, be giving away some extra prizes, and the prizes we have today, Leah, will be doing a drawing at the end, correct?
You got it.
Okay, great. So our presenter today is Tony Morrow from Bellarmine, who's going to walk us through. Hi, Tony.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us. And Tony's going to be taking us through a presentation on PowerShell. So I love that picture. Tony, the sun will come out tomorrow. It's already out today. I'm really glad. That's helping with the quarantine.
I'm in my basement. I have no sense of day or night.
Good. Well, yeah, I'm in my office, and so hopefully you're in a comfortable place and can hear us okay. As I mentioned, and for you folks that have just joined us, if you have not figured out already, we can't hear you. Everyone's muted, but we can chat. If you look in the top right toolbar, you can see a chat window, and you can feel free to ask questions for Tony or ask presenters, and Leah and I will be chiming in to get your questions to Tony. Other housekeeping items, obviously want to thank our sponsors who continue to support LouMug. And if you our sponsors like Fortinet and Veeam. If you go to LouMug.org, you'll see all of our sponsors. We encourage you to check out their great products and services. So Dell EMC, another one of our sponsors, and then a number of others, gold and in-kind sponsors. So thanks to everyone. So without, oh yeah, one more thing. So next month's meeting is on Teams. It's going to be delivered over Teams. The specific topic is still to be determined, and it will be Friday, April 24th. And so it will probably be another Teams live event. When we all get back online, my guess is there's still going to be some social distancing, and things may take a while to get back to normal, but we'll be glad to take any comments on how today's event works and ways we can make it better. So we're obviously looking for any input you can give us on that. So we will get started here just a moment with Tony and PowerShell, and we'll be wrapping up about 1 o'clock and do our QA and do a drawing. And so for everyone that registered, we've got your list, and we will just basically do a random drawing of those for some gift cards. So Tony, without further ado, please take it away.
Hey, Tony, real quick. Are you using a PowerPoint? And if so, will you make your slides available afterwards?
Yes, it's a really short PowerPoint, but I do have a lot of code samples, and I will give that to you so you can put it up on the website for sharing.
Awesome, thank you.
Excellent.
All right.
So if you want to go ahead and share your screen, we will get that up there, Tony, and rock and roll.
All right. Let's get that going. Let's get that. Everybody should be able to see my screen now. I hope.
Yes.
All right. Because I can't see anybody anymore, or the chat or anything. So I just have my screen. So PowerShell your way. You know, Leah and team, you know, sent out the survey late last year for topics that you guys wanted to learn about from these monthly meetings, and you know, one of the top things on there was PowerShell, and I am one of those people who use PowerShell on a daily basis. A lot of the work I do is is based on Windows and Active Directory and Office 365, so I end up using PowerShell a lot for my day-to-day job. So I thought I would help share some of the knowledge I've learned over the years, some of the tips and tricks, and hopefully you can take it back and apply it to what you're doing in your day-to-day job. Let's see. Who am I? Like Craig said, I'm Tony Morrow. I'm Principal Solutions Architect at Bellarmine University. There's my email address. I'm on Twitter, but it's mostly for just following some tech stuff. So if you want that, I can give it to you, but there's really no reason to follow me. I've been at Bellarmine for 11 years now, mostly focusing on networking, infrastructure, phone system, problem solving. This is a slide I had from last year. So PowerShell, like I said, lots of PowerShell that I do day to day, just to use. I always like putting in a disclaimer here. One, I'm not a Microsoft MVP or partner. I don't have any inside knowledge of what Microsoft's doing or what PowerShell team is doing. All of the technology showcased has been paid for and licensed by Bellarmine. We don't get anything for free. We pay for licenses just like you do. All the opinions in this presentation are my own. Nobody's paying me for this presentation. Nobody's reviewed it, so there could be lots of factual errors in it. And I'm not a professional YouTuber. I don't look at the camera as much as I probably should be doing, and I will probably start talking fast when I start getting into subjects I'm really passionate about. So just be warned, I might start talking too fast. Leah, you may have to slow me down. And
no animals were hurt in the making of this presentation as well, right?
That's correct. My dog is currently upstairs, probably sleeping. So
okay.
Topics, you know, I'm just going to go over real quick what is PowerShell, and then we'll talk about, I'll do like 2 quick things of overview of how I use PowerShell, and then we'll get into a live demo, assuming it all works, because demo fails, their thing. So what is PowerShell? For some of you, it might be that annoying command prompt you have to use anytime you want to do anything in Exchange. I know when I first started learning how to manage Exchange, everything said use PowerShell. I'm like, why can't it just be in the GUI? Because it's Windows. Well, everything in Windows is in a GUI. And then you learn that, oh, the entire Exchange 2010 interface is running on top of PowerShell, which is really cool. Like, you built an entire GUI for Exchange in PowerShell, and it's running on PowerShell commandlets. That's really cool. But not everything is in there. So, there's that annoyance. It can also be, you can also say it's that, it's that thing Microsoft keep pushing to replace command prompt. As Windows 10 has been updated over the years, they replaced in the Windows key X menu command prompt with Windows PowerShell. If you do like the shift right click on a folder, it asks you to do you want to open a PowerShell window here instead of a command prompt? And for us people who don't like change, this is a change and we don't like it. So but no, seriously, what is PowerShell? This is straight from their website, from the Microsoft Docs website. PowerShell is a task-based command line shell and scripting language built on .NET. That's it. It uses the same foundation as C#, as VB.NET, as all those languages that we're familiar with from Microsoft, but it's a scripting language. It's like Bash. It's like Python. It just it's much easier to use, to start learning to use, if you're just doing scripting type jobs. It's the brainchild of Jeffrey Snover. He's been at Microsoft for like 20 plus years now. He started PowerShell. He's nurtured PowerShell along the way. He's now managing like the Microsoft substrate, which is this kind of intermediary between like the Graph API and all these other things that are out in Office 365 and all of the really deep backend stuff. The substrate is supposed to kind of make it commonplace for you to access that data. In an interview with Jeffrey Snover, he said it's designed. I wanted to take the Unix toolset and use it in Windows, but that's a problem because Unix is all file-based, Windows is all API-based, and when they tried that, it just didn't work. It just failed spectacularly. So they started out a project of codename Monad, and then what resulted was PowerShell. And so it was released in 1.0 was released in 2006, and it slowly got more and more feature sets added to it. It's went up to PowerShell 7 was just released at the start of this month, and I'll get into some details about that because not all PowerShells are created equal. Speaking of which, 2 products, 1 name. So if you've been watching the history of the story of PowerShell, especially in like the past 3 or 4 years, you know that there's a split. There's what is now known as Windows PowerShell, and there's what's known as PowerShell Core. Actually, now they dropped the core. It's now just PowerShell. But there's a clear line between the two of them. Windows PowerShell is built on the .NET framework. That thing you have to install on every computer to do anything, to use any application these days. It's all built on the .NET framework. So everything that you can do on .NET, you can do in PowerShell to an extent. As of Windows 7, Windows 7 came with PowerShell 2.0 installed. So it's been on your computer, especially since like 2009. The last release was 5.1. That came out with Windows 10. And if you are not running Windows PowerShell 5.1 on your systems or your servers, do it. It will make automation in your life a lot easier. And if you want to use Windows Admin Center with like Server 2008 R2 or Server 2012, you have to have PowerShell 5 installed. But there's a link right there. It takes you to the website for Windows Management Foundation. Install that. You'll have PowerShell 5 on your computer. You'll get the latest version of the PowerShell Ise, and you're ready to go. But do know it's no longer being developed. Microsoft has said, Windows PowerShell, we had a great run, but we're moving on to something new. And that new thing is PowerShell. It used to be called PowerShell Core. Now it's just called PowerShell. And the difference between it and Windows PowerShell is pretty simple. One, it's built on .NET Core. As of the 7.0 release, it's built on .NET Core 3.1. And so everything you can do in .NET Core, you can do in PowerShell 7. The original release for .NET Core, PowerShell Core 6 was back in 2016. Like it was like August, like right before Ignite. But you know, just this, like I said, just this month it was released. Version 7.0 got released, and they're planning on 7.1 to be released at, you know, I think later this year. Who knows what's going to happen with COVID-19 at this point? But one of the cool things you get with PowerShell 7 is that it's cross-platform. Because it's built on .NET Core, you can install .NET Core on Macs, Linux systems, and you can run PowerShell on Macs and Linux systems. In fact, I do it personally. I have a little Ubuntu home server that's just running Plex and stuff, and so I use PowerShell on there to do scripts like automate like transcoding videos and stuff. Microsoft has said PowerShell is the future. This is what we're putting all of our efforts into. And as they do that, more and more if you've ever tried using PowerShell Core, you know that it doesn't really work. Not everything from Windows PowerShell works in PowerShell Core. That's getting better. They got a lot of the .NET methods and types and functions ported over to .NET Core 3.1, and so there's a lot more compatibility with PowerShell Core than there was even last month. It's not perfect. So Windows PowerShell 5.1, PowerShell 7. Which one should I use? This is the rule I'm using today. This can change 6 months from now. This can change next year, especially when .NET 5 comes out at the end of this year or next year. That can completely change. But as of today, right now, March 27th, 2020, I use these rules. If I'm using modules or commandlets that I'm being provided, be it from a Microsoft product or from somebody else, chances are it's written for PowerShell 5. For Windows PowerShell 5. If you're wanting to manage Office 365 or Azure AD, you should use Windows PowerShell 5.1, and I'll show why in the next slide. But you know, if you're just learning PowerShell and you're just building your own little simple functions and commandlets, you know, use PowerShell 7. Anything you do in PowerShell 7 should work in 5.1. I say should. There might be a few little small differences that you have to code around. If you're not diving down and using .NET functions and methods and types directly, you can use PowerShell 7. You can do that, but just note that some things you do in PowerShell against .NET Core are not going to work in .NET Framework. Case in point, not everything, like I said, not everything works in PowerShell 7. This is a screenshot of me trying to use the Azure Active Directory module and the old MS Online module in PowerShell 7. And so you can see here, I did an install module that worked fine. I did an import of the module that worked fine, and then I tried to connect. And when I tried to connect the Azure AD module, which if you're familiar with it, it pops up a little web window where you can type in your credentials to connect to Azure AD. I got through that entire process, and then I hit an error. I'm like, okay, maybe the old module works. So I go pull out MS Online. You know, I just try to connect. I didn't even get a pop-up asking me for my credentials, and then I come back with a, hey, I couldn't load this type, system security cryptology, SHA-256 CNG, because it's that entire thing is not in .NET Core today. So, like I said, today, a lot of stuff, if you're managing stuff, especially with Azure and things, you're probably want to stick with Windows PowerShell. When PowerShell 7.1 or 8 or whatever comes out later this year or next year, that might completely change. Do we have any questions up to this point, Leah?
Yes.
Okay.
Can you run both versions on the same system?
Yes, they are installed side by side. And I can show that. I can show that when we get into the demo. You can have both Windows PowerShell installed and PowerShell 7 installed. They're literally installed in two independent folders, and there's two separate shortcuts on your desktop in your start menu for them.
We also have a comment from Don Walker. He said, it's hard to read these out loud. $PS version table.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you can so that's how you can check and see what version of PowerShell your current session is using. We can show that, and I can get into it when we get into the demos. I can show that really quickly.
That's all we've got for now.
Okay. So what do I use PowerShell for? Well, like I started with, everything. I use it for getting answers to questions. With like how many members or how many people are a member of a group. If you've ever tried to get that number from admin users, AD users, and computers, it's not an easy answer to get. But with PowerShell, there's literally a command that called get AD group members, AD group member. You can get that, and then you can run that against. You can count how many objects that returns, and there's your number. Questions like who has permissions to a distribution list. It's easy. It's pretty easy to go through Exchange UA Admin Center to get that answer. What if you need to audit your entire Exchange environment? Do you really want to click on every distribution list and group, and then click on the tab, and then click on the menu option to look at delegated access or whatever it's called? With PowerShell, I think if I remember correctly, you can do get distribution list, and it's one of the properties that gets returned. It will give you the property of who has send permissions to this list. So for auditing, it's pretty nice. Automating tasks. I'm going to actually demo this. Adding users and computers to groups. We use MPS to manage some of our wireless security. And one of the things you can't do is you can't use OU as a filter. At least I don't think you can. So what I do is I take all the members, all the people or computers in an OU, put them in a group, and now that group has permissions to access our wireless network. And I'll show that I'll show a simplified version of that in the demo. Update AD user information based on data from our ERP system. We have our Bellarmine's ERP system can push user objects and data directly into Active Directory, and we use that, but it doesn't take data away. Like somebody becomes employed at Bellarmine, we can populate their office location, their telephone number, their department, their manager and stuff. Actually, not manager. Take that away. But when they stop being an employee, our ERP system doesn't send anything to AD to say clear all that data out. So we do that. So we have a process that looks at a report from our ERP system every day, and goes and touches all the AD objects that we need to update. Whether that be a new student, or somebody changed their legal name, somebody has a nickname they want to use, or somebody's office location changed. We can now automate all of that using PowerShell. If you saw my presentation last summer about SCCM, I use PowerShell to go and do stuff like download Google Chrome, add it as an application in SCCM, deploy it to a collection of users and computers, and update a task sequence. And it's all completely automated. It takes, it takes only a few minutes to run, and I'm limited on how fast I can download Chrome, but you can do that. Identity management. I haven't done this personally. This is my coworker Brian, who literally built an entire identity management system on using PowerShell, and we use that for managing, like, when a user object is created, where does it go? What OU does it get placed in, based on a bunch of criteria? What license in Office 365 do they get? And a whole bunch of other stuff. So Brian is really the architect of our identity management system. It's called Goldberg. Rube Goldberg, ha. And it's really complex. It's like I think it's dozens of command lists that he's written just to kind of simplify the code, and just runs through every object practically every day.
The chuckles are coming in the chat window, Tony.
Thanks. Bulk changes, similar to the automation stuff. If we need to make a change to a bunch of objects in AD and Office 365 or Exchange, we use PowerShell for it, because, man, I'm not going to go through and touch every object manually by hand using admin users and AD users and computers. It's just going to take forever. For example, we're getting ready to change up our The office telephone number listed in Active Directory. Right now, today, we just have your 7-digit phone number. We're getting ready to add area code to that, so we can our faculty and staff can use their office phone as an MFA for MFA verification. Of course, that's kind of less useful right now since nobody's on campus, but that's our plan, and we're going to have it probably done next week. Fixing mistakes. We use Moodle as a learning management system. It's similar to Blackboard and Canvas. Microsoft has a plugin for Moodle that will allow you to create Microsoft Teams based on Moodle courses, and that works great. Except right now it's not working great. Sometimes it creates the team, sometimes it doesn't. And so I have a script that we can feed it a course, and it will see, does the course ID is there a group ID for it? Does the team exist? Are the correct members and owners of the team correct? And if not, it goes and fixes all of that. It takes like 20 seconds to run per course, and that's the limitation. That's the limitation of how fast the Graph API is talking to us. Speaking of which, talking with APIs. This is probably the coolest advanced thing I've done with PowerShell in the past 2 or 3 years, and that's talking directly to APIs to push and pull data. So like I said, we can push and pull data from the graph if we need to. Sometimes we need to use the graph rather than the modules provided by Microsoft because some of the functionality is missing there. But I use it to talk to our Ruckus Smart Zone wireless controller to pull stats. So every 5 minutes I'm pulling all the stats, all the connection stats from all of our APs and pushing that into Elk via Elk's API. Just to be able to collect that data over time and like, oh, this AP during this class had 50 people connected to it or 50 devices. Resources. I can make like 5 slides of resources, but I kind of condensed it down into just one. If you've never done any kind of scripting with PowerShell whatsoever, and you want a resource to use, I highly recommend Learn Windows PowerShell in a Month of Lunches. It's by a guy named Don Jones and Jeffrey Hicks. Don actually is one of the writers for PowerShell. That's his day job. He works for PowerShell.org, and he's kind of the PowerShell advocate out there. He's out there promoting PowerShell to people. He's written a bunch of books, and that book, the 3rd edition one, that's the stepping stone. That gets you into learning the basics of PowerShell. You know, how to use variables, how to call up variables, and some of the stuff I'm going to talk about when we get into the demo. If you are familiar with PowerShell and you want to take that knowledge to the next level, check out PowerShell Scripting in a Month of Lunches. I have that book came out in 2016, 2017. I have an older version of the book. It's called Learn PowerShell Toolmaking in a Month of Lunches. I learned so much from this book, and I have notes in here, but learning how to build your commandlets, how to take your script, turn it into a reusable commandlet or function, build multiple functions or commandlets, turn that into a module, be able to use that module across multiple systems, in different ways. And PowerShell scripting goes through all that detail. If you want some fun videos to watch, less educational, more just, you will learn stuff in it, but it's really fun to follow along. Jeffrey Snover has done a breakout session in Ignite and TechEd practically every year for the past 10 years called Powershell Unplugged. Just go to YouTube, search for that, and you'll learn so much in that 1 hour that your head will spin. And the thing is, you'll have fun doing it because Jeffrey is a really good storyteller, and it's always fun. If you want some deep down technical knowledge on how a commandlet works, Microsoft has gotten really, really good at putting documentation in their docs website. So just do a Google search. If you're doing do a Google search for the name of a commandlet, and usually the first result is going to be docs.microsoft.com. Click on it. There's just going to be all the help information and usually examples on how to use that commandlet.
Hey, Tony, this is Craig. I wanted to ask you a question around that. So these are great resources. Thanks for sharing that. How did you first kind of get started with PowerShell? Was it really more out of the desire or necessity, or was it just something you were wanting to check out to tap into the power of it?
It was out of necessity, pretty much. I'll show you like one of the first ever scripts that I wrote that we use today is that OU to group script, because I really wanted to, for when we're doing our wireless network, I wanted, we have 2 wireless networks at Bellin, one for faculty, staff, one for students. And I only wanted, I wanted faculty, staff computers to use computer credentials to join the faculty, staff network. And, you know, the computers that are in our computer labs and stuff, I didn't want them being able to join that network. And so one of the challenges in like, how do I limit that security scope? And the easiest way to do that is with a group. But there's no easy or automated task that I'm aware of that will take an OU of objects and put them into a group. So I wrote a script that did that. The first time I did this, I had Brian holding my hand like the entire time, because Brian had been using PowerShell longer than I had. And I think I broke that script like 5 times, and I still went, Brian, I broke it again. And he'd go in there and he'd fix it. And then, you know, over the time, like, oh, that was pretty easy. And then, you know, we had some other projects along the lines, and I just kind of started learning more and more pieces of PowerShell as I needed them. And that's, you know, and that's, for me, that's how I learn stuff, is I have to have a reason to learn something. Like, I would love to be an awesome .NET programmer. In my day-to-day job, I don't have a purpose. I don't have a reason for writing C# code. So, but I write PowerShell on a daily basis, and they're kind of the same.
Hey Tony, that kind of brings into a question somebody asked. Do you need prior programming skills to learn PowerShell?
No. If you go out and get that first book, the Learning Windows PowerShell and Monthly Lunches, that is your PowerShell 101 course. So Don will go through the details on like learning like what is a variable? How do you declare a variable? How do you add data to a variable? How do you pull data from a variable? How do you manipulate the data? All of that is taught in that book. And like I said, if you went through programming like 101 in college and you did JavaScript programming or some kind of like VB, a lot of the concepts are going to apply to PowerShell. The thing that's different, as with any programming language, a lot of times is just syntax. How do you declare a variable? How do you do a loop? How do you do all these different actions? It usually is code that's context sensitive on what coding language you're in, but the overall concept, the overall idea of how to code is the same across most languages.
Awesome, great insight there. Thanks, Tony. I think it was Frank Zappa that said that necessity is the mother of invention.
Yes.
So you shared some of your resources, like sites that you use. Have you found any like, or have you ever downloaded some code that was bad or possibly broke anything? And any tips and tricks to check the you know, whether that code can be trusted?
So code trusting, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. This kind of goes beyond what I was going to talk about. So a lot of code that is shared from Microsoft is signed, just like just like applications you download from Microsoft or from a verified source. They've signed it with their programming with a certificate that they got for code signing. Typically, if you can run PowerShell without having to change the execution policy, that code should be pretty safe, because if you go in and make any changes to that code signing is now invalid. And I'll show a good resource for getting code. The second way to do it is I do this a lot, is if somebody has PowerShell code, I go look at the code. I've gotten proficient enough to be able to read code. I am not a programmer. I do not do programming day to day. I don't have good I don't have good practices with coding, especially when it comes to like types and memory management or any of that stuff. But you know, over the years of using PowerShell, you learn programming techniques, and you kind of learn what, when you look at code, what is it doing. Case in point, I've been debugging that Moodle stuff, and turns out PHP and PowerShell are pretty close, I've learned.
Excellent, thank you.
All right. So that wasn't too bad. So I'm going to get into demo time, and luckily, because we started a little bit early, I have more time to stretch this out. Haha, no. But we'll go through. I'm going to go through like some things you should know how to do in PowerShell. These are like I got 5 things, and so we'll go through each one of those, and hopefully you kind of get an idea. And this is definitely beginner to intermediate. That seems to be the most requested in the survey that Leah sent out last month. And so, you know, hopefully even the people who are proficient with PowerShell can take these ideas and apply them to your own stuff.
Hey Tony, we got a question.
Okay.
Do you look at the Microsoft PowerShell Gallery for scripts to download?
That's actually going to be my first thing on the demo, so we'll answer that. So just real quick on the book resources, Manning Publications, Learn Windows PowerShell and Month Lunches. You can order a physical copy of the book. You can get an ebook copy of it. If you just want to look at the book, check out down here. So free. You can see the entire book for free. Just click on the table of contents to get started, and you can click on it. And so literally, this is the book. So you don't have to buy the book. You can go through the book and just start reading it. Each chapter / section will take you about 30 minutes to an hour to complete. And it goes over, like, this book is the basics, like learning the details of it. And if you scroll really fast, no, it's working fine. All the text in here is kind of is encoded into a different language, and so you can't like select all and copy and paste it out. You have to scroll. Probably won't be able to see it there. But yeah, there is the basic, I'll call it 101 level book on learning PowerShell. The PowerShell scripting, this is the next level. If you're familiar with PowerShell, you've written a script or two before, this gets you to the next level. And in fact, if you buy this book, you get the digital copy of this book for free. I said I went through this book after I bought it, and it was a great resource on learning stuff. I've got a bunch of tabs in here of things I go through that I reference back. I don't reference it as much as I used to, but I would always like, man, how do I do that thing? And I had a tab open like how to do your own modules. I have a section for that. And if you want to play around PowerShell 7, it's up on GitHub. Like Microsoft is making stuff open source, so PowerShell is now completely open source. It's under the MIT license. But you can go here. You can go to releases. Oh, 5. Let's see. 7.1 preview is out now, but we're going to scroll down. Oh, I hit the wrong button. 7.0 release. This is the latest release. You can scroll down and get the Windows version. You can get the Mac version. I do recommend reading the documentation on how to install it on Mac and Linux, because you do need to install .NET Core first, and you have to get that from your package repository, whether that's apt-yum or some other repository. If you don't want to, there's by default Windows PowerShell includes PowerShell Ise, which is an IDE environment only for PowerShell. If you are programming on Mac or Linux, or you want to use something or if you're familiar with other editors like Atom, there's Visual Studio Code. People seem to be loving this tool. I don't use it as much and it all comes down to muscle memory of things. I'm used to how to do shortcuts in PowerShell Ise and how things work. And Visual Studio Code is just different, and I haven't gotten used to different yet. So yeah, demos. Oh no. Okay, we're going to jump into a virtual Hyper-V environment. This is literally a computer running in Hyper-V on my desktop here. I got a little domain server running behind it. But the first thing I want to talk about, one of the first things you should learn about is how to install modules. And what are modules? Modules is a way to extend the capability of PowerShell. So by default, PowerShell has a ton of functions built into it that come from .NET in general, and then also come from like when you on Windows in general. There's a bunch of modules that come with because they're added because of Windows. But we can extend PowerShell further, and a module is basically just a bunch of is just a collection of commandlets, and we can install them in several different ways. We can go download them from somebody's website. We can go get them from GitHub. But the safest method, as we were talking about before, is to get them from a website called Powershell Gallery. So Powershell Gallery, this is a Microsoft hosted service, like see Microsoft Corporation down here. And when they released Windows PowerShell 5, they included a thing called PowerShell Get and a new commandlet called install module. And they built this repository. So this is just like if you're familiar on Linux with apt or yum or those other package managers, or if you're familiar with brew on Mac OS, this is the same style of system, but just for PowerShell packages and modules. And you can see there are 6,500 different unique packages or modules. They're kind of interchangeable, but not. And anything that Microsoft is releasing is pretty much going to be published here in PowerShell Gallery. But it's not just Microsoft. Anybody as a community member can sign in with their Microsoft account and publish their own modules for other people to download and use. And so, like I said, Microsoft stuff is in here, community stuff is in here, even other companies like VMware. If you have a VMware virtual environment and you've ever wanted to use PowerCLI to manage your environment, I do it a little bit. Brian does it a lot more in our environment. PowerCLI is their module, and it's here in PowerShell Gallery. Search. There it is. You know, a few years ago, if you wanted PowerCLI from VMware, you went to VMware's website, you downloaded an installer and installed the module onto your computer, and then you went on. Now, all you got to do is just install it from PowerShell Gallery. And how do I do that? Well, if you click into a package here on Gallery, it tells you right there how to install the module. And so I can take that, I can copy that out. I can go over here to PowerShell Ise, I can paste it, and I can do F5 or F8, and it will install PowerCLI on my desktop here, on this virtual desktop here. I will add a disclaimer. If you're working in Windows PowerShell and you're installing a module, by default, the module wants to be installed for all users. And by all users, I mean into your program files folder. And, you know, since Windows Vista and UAC came around, you can't do that unless you're an administrator of the computer. So to install a module for Windows PowerShell, one option is to open your PowerShell as administrator and run install module, or you can do a parameter called scope. And this is just part of the install module function. And if I hit space, I can now choose if I want to install it for all users, which again is the default, or I can install it for current user. If I choose current user, that PowerCLI module will now be installed instead of to the program files folder to my documents folder. There'll be a new folder in there called Windows PowerShell, and that's where it will install it. If you're using PowerShell 7, they swap the default context, and that now installs to the current user context by default. So if you're using PowerShell 7, you don't have to worry about scope. If you're using PowerShell 5, you do have to worry about scope if you're not an administrator. I will add a disclaimer of the disclaimer. Some modules do not like running from current user. I think Exchange Online Management is one of those. That one I think you do have to install into as all users for it to function correctly. I do know you have to change the execution policy for it to even work. So just just be aware, and a lot of times that will be noted here in PowerShell Gallery up here, like in this section, they'll tell you what if there's any extra steps. Okay, so disclaimer, the disclaimer is over, and I think the disclaimer is over. So installing a module, again, is really simple. It's just install -module -name space Azure AD. Is that big enough, Leah? Do I need to make that bigger?
It's kind of hard to read, so
okay.
You can make it just a little bit.
Let me get rid of your video, and so then it gives people a bit more screen real estate. So hopefully everyone got enough of your beautiful face.
Okay.
A couple of questions too.
Okay.
Are modules placed in the gallery by community members vetted for security, functionality, etc.?
I don't know. You'd have to research that. I did not look that up myself. Okay.
And then, well, Josh is asking the group, but does anyone have a favorite custom ISE theme?
Oh, that's a good question. I will say, if you're using the PowerShell Ise on Windows 10, there is one thing. If you don't make any other change, you need to make one change, and I'm going to show that right now. If you go to Tools, Options, you have your colors and stuff. Click on Script Pane Tokens, scroll down to Variable, and change the color of the variable. By default, before Windows 10, it was orange red. And I'll show you why real quick. So I'm going to say this is text, and then I'm going to say variable. You see, these colors are different, but they're very, very similar. In fact, because you can do stuff like this is a variable. And the thing is, that variable the contents of that variable can actually be presented in text like that. But if you're just looking at this, you're just going to think that this is going to say this is a variable. But if I hit F8 on this is and because I don't have variable declared as anything, so I'm going to just say, let's just do that. Variable is equal to 0. This is a variable. This is a variable. But visually, I wouldn't expect that. And so in the old version of PowerShell Ise, variable used to be orange red. And so now I can clearly see, like, oh, this is a whatever that variable is. So I don't know why they changed the colors of I don't know why they changed the colors of all the text in the Ise. But if you're going to use Ise, please change your variable color. You'll find when you start trying to debug code, you're like, why isn't this returning the correct thing? A lot of times it's because you didn't realize that you had $something, a variable name, and you actually just know, like, no, I wanted that to actually be $blah. So just know that. So yeah, installing a module, it's really simple. Install -module -name Azure AD. And then, so once you've installed a module, so like, again, this is the Azure AD module. This is for managing your Exchange Online environment. This is for managing Teams. This is for managing SharePoint Online. With those 4 modules installed, I can manage pretty much most of my Office 365 environment from those 4 commandlets. In fact, so when you go to use a module, I always recommend importing the module into your current script. Basically, what importing does is it just loads all of the commandlets from that module into your current PowerShell window or session. And that just makes sure that everything is going to be ready to go when you go run it the first time. By default, PowerShell can load modules on demand based on the commandlet you type in. But I always recommend importing a module first, just to make sure that it loads up correctly, and then using the rest of your script. And so you can see down here, I'm just going to import module. I can do import module Azure AD. Just the note, I'm going to hit F8 to run selection, which is just run whatever I've highlighted, or I'm going to hit the F8 key. a lot of times. So that if you see me things automatically popping up, that's what's going on. But I can do import module Azure AD, and it's done. I guess. How do I know? I don't know. Well, if it failed, it would give you an error message. But there's this flag that's on most commandlets that you get that are provided to you called verbose. And what happens normally is the developer will have a bunch of information that's in the PowerShell commandlet that is not outputted to the console because it's a lot of background stuff, and typically the user doesn't need to see it. That's where the verbose flag comes in. You can do .verbose, and in this case, the developers of Azure AD module actually put verbosity in the commandlet. So now when I run this, let me just do CLS real quick. There, it did a whole bunch of stuff, and this is what it did in the background where we didn't see any output. This is what was actually happening in the background. So it imported all of these functions for commandlets into my current PowerShell session. Oh, excuse me. And so we can do that for all of them. I can just select them, run F8. You can ignore this. Ignore this code. It's just unapproved verbs. PowerShell has the function. All the function names are supposed to be noun-verb, like get user, set user. Get and set are the verb. User is the noun, and they have a list. Microsoft has a list of approved verbs, and when you use a word that is not one of those verbs, it just outputs that warning. So just note that it's a warning. You can ignore that. It's not going to break PowerShell if you don't use get, set, connect, invoke, import, export. If you use whatever noun you want, it's not going to break PowerShell. But now that I have the modules imported, I can now do connect AD to Azure AD. And then I get that pop up. I want to log into a dev environment that we have at belltest12345.microsoft.com. Okay. And so now in this PowerShell session, I've connected to Azure AD, and now I can start doing all these different actions like get Azure AD user. I just want to say, give me all the objects, because there's only 20 objects in this environment because it's a demo, it's a development environment, and I have to give it true because I want to make sure it gets all. And they look, there is all the users of our Azure AD environment. So modules, they're easy to install, assuming you have PowerShell 5 or newer. PowerShell Gallery is a great resource for finding modules that are produced by Microsoft, the community, and other companies. Always remember to import your modules before you start using them, and that's kind of the basics on the first thing you should learn about with modules. Any questions after that?
We had some comments like Tim Barrett said, update help is your friend.
Oh, yes.
Roger pointed out that you can get a variety of themes on GitHub, and Patrick gave a very long command, I guess, and I pushed those all to Q&A live so people can read those at their leisure. Okay.
Yeah, Git help. I was going to talk about Git help, but I kind of pivoted my demo to a different direction. But that's really great. If you need to know how to do all the details about this function or this commandlet, you can do git help and online. And when you run this, it's going to open up. Well, apparently that one doesn't have a link. So, oh, sorry. But we can do online. That one should work. Hey, look. So this is at docs.microsoft.com. Talks about what the module is about and how to use it. So really, yeah, that's a really great resource on trying to figure out how to use a commandlet.
Chris wants to know, Are there focused PowerShell for network engineers resources that are known?
I've not looked into it myself. I actually have a little example of like one really simple thing you can do with PowerShell. With Snmp, that's kind of in my demo. I've done a little bit of network, like doing stuff with switches and stuff, but it's mostly been like pulling Snmp data. I've not really dived into a lot of deeper stuff with it, because it gets when you have to SSH into devices to pull information, it kind of gets a little hairy with PowerShell. PowerShell's not really doesn't really work too well with PowerShell. It's possible, but it's kind of kludgy.
Okay, and then we have Darren Ferguson. He said, I found that PowerShell Ise froze randomly often once we implemented MFA modern authentication on our Office 365 sessions. Visual Studio Code does not seem to have the issue. Have you seen this?
I have not. No, I personally I've not seen that issue. I have MFA turned on for my work account and my work admin account, and through doing like the connect and stuff, I have not ran into connection issues with ISE. Sorry, I don't have much more to provide on that.
Okay, that's all I have for now.
All right, so we went through modules. Let's talk about thing number two. You should learn how to do, and that's using pipes. If you've ever had to do anything in a Linux or Unix environment, you know that a lot of the tool sets in that platform in that environment is designed to allow you to take the output of one application, pipe it to another, do something with that data, pipe it to another, do something with the data again, pipe it. And that was one of the things Jeffrey Snover wanted to be able to accomplish with PowerShell, because I don't know if you've ever tried to do this. If you ever tried to do IP config and output that to something useful, like you needed to make a report on computers, the output of IP config isn't really that useful, is it? When you're trying to like capture it and then manipulate it. Whereas on Linux, you could do cat file, which gives you the output of a file, and then you could pipe that to a grep, which is a filter like grep Tony. And so if I do cat file pipe grep Tony, the output of that is going to be every line in that file that has Tony on it. Well, the thing about PowerShell is the scripts, the functions, and the commandlets that are provided to you, and the ones you write should be able to do the same thing. You should be able to take the output of one function and pipe it into the input of another function and be able to manipulate that data. And so here's an example of this. Say I have an Active Directory environment, and I have some people in here. I have people in accounting, and I have my HR people, my IT people, and my boss says, "Give me all the users whose last name is Foster in our environment." You're like, "Why?" And then he's like, "Don't ask questions." I'm like, "Okay." So we can do that really easily. We can do get AD user, and we'll do filter star. Now, I will say, disclaimer, don't do this if you have don't do filter star if you have a large AD environment like we do, like 45,000 user objects, because this will take minutes to come back with data. But this is a demo. There's a better way to do filtering on get AD user. I don't have time to show that in this demo, but just go do a Google search on how to use the filter flag. Actually, go to docs.microsoft.com because it will show you how to use the filter parameter. But disclaimer over. So get AD user filter star. So this is going to return every user in my environment. There's like 100 in there right now, so it's okay. And so I want to pipe that to, I want to filter all those user objects and only get the people whose last name is Foster. So there's a commandlet for that. It's called where object. And then if I do some brackets, I want to tell it what do I want to filter on. So I want to say $_. $_ it's only lives in the context of piping and is basically the output of the previous, whatever is coming in from the pipe. So if I had one object coming in from get AD user, that object would be just that one user. If I got 5 objects back, that $_ is going to be an array of those 5 objects. But just know when you're piping, $_ is the output of the previous command that's being piped in. So I'm just going to do, this is the same thing if you're doing an if statement. So I'm going to say if it's equal to or dot surname, because if I do get AD user, let me just show this real quick. It returns a bunch of objects. So you can see here's the output of one of those objects, and there's surname. And there's my admin. That was the first account I created in this environment. So I'm going to say so out of all those objects, where the surname is equal to Foster. And so what do I get from that? I get this. Well, it's kind of hard to see. So what I'm going to do real quick is I'm just going to format this into a table for visualization. Do not, I repeat, do not use format table to store data in PowerShell or to send it somewhere else. Format table and format list is for data visualization. It's for us to be able to see the data that just got created and be able to look at it. But do not use. But that should be the last thing if you're just looking at it in the console. Do not use it to save it into like a variable. So I'm just going to say format table. And then there's my 5 users whose last name is Foster. If I scroll over here, okay. Don't worry about this. This goes into my next example. Okay, so we've got a list of users. What if and so your boss says, no, don't give me all of this. I just want their first name, their last name, and their user principal name or their email address, basically. All right, you're like, okay, fine. How do I do that? Well, I'm just going to take that same line and I'm going to pipe it to another commandlet called select object. Technically, select object is just selecting everything that just came in from the pipe, but I'm going to use this parameter called property, and now I'm only going to select the properties I want to return. So I'm going to say I want the person's given name because that's right there. I want the person's surname, and I want the person's principal name. Hopefully I spelled that right. And so when I run that, hey, look, now I have my output of just given name, surname, user principal name. You're like, awesome, got it. Here you go, boss. And he's like, great. I need this as an Excel spread. I need this as a spreadsheet or a CSV. You're like, okay, fine. So let's take that output and let's pipe it to another command called export CSV. And as you can see, there's a lot of other export commands. Most of these you're not going to worry about. If you're going to use any of them, it's typically going to be export CSV. If you're trying to get data out of PowerShell to give to somebody else. But CSV, I give it a path. I'm going to say reports. I want to say this is the fosters.csv. And just so there's no magic behind it, you see there's not a file called the fosters.csv. That's for an example here in a moment. But I can take that, run that, and actually we can probably do verbose, can't we? Yeah, we can do verbose. We can see what's going on. Hey, look, performing operation, export CSV to the fosters.csv. That's literally what it did. And if I go in here and refresh, nope, okay. Come on, nope, I sent it to the wrong folder. I sent it to recovery, that's bad. Demo fail, okay. There we go, reports. There we go, okay. Now we got a CSV file of the Fosters. So here's the same as what we saw right there in the console as CSV format. And so we have given name, surname, user principal name, Margaret Foster, and that's what they use to log in with. And then your boss says, you know, can you get rid of this line? I really don't like it. And you're like, Okay, fine. Turns out there's a parameter for export CSV called no type information. So we can take that, run that all again, close that out. Yay for Notepad not doing file locks. And now, hey, look, here's a CSV. And so if I were to take this, open it up in Excel, it's going to format it. It's going to put it all in columns and be all pretty. I don't have Office installed on this virtual machine, so this is what you get to see. So piping, we just took all the output of our entire AD environment of users. We filtered down to only getting Fosters. Again, don't do this in production because it's going to be really slow. And then we said, I only want to get the first name, last name, and UPN, and then I want to export that to a CSV. That's all one line of code that you can run in a matter of seconds. So that is piping. So that's number 2. That's the second thing you should learn how to do in PowerShell. I'm sure there's a lot of questions around that. Anything?
Hang on, I know this is going to surprise you, but the cloud is loading.
Okay.
So I'm looking at a spinny wheel. I don't know if anyone was having trouble inputting Q&A
Okay.
in, but maybe if you want to keep going, and then if I see stuff pop up, I'll let you know.
Okay. We can do that.
I'm not seeing anything, so you're good.
Perfect. Okay, good. Hey, look, there's me doing sample code to make sure it works all correctly ahead of time. Okay. Thing number 3, loops. Loops are really, like, if you're doing repetitive tasks, loops are your friend in PowerShell. They're what's going to make your repetitive tasks go by in seconds instead of hours. And there are 2 different ways to do loops. There is the whole pipe it all through one command, through one line option, and then there's the second option, which is, imports data, store it as a variable, as an array, and then iterate through that array. If you've ever done in coding 101, if you've ever done a for loop where you do I equals 0, and while I is less than 5, I plus plus, do these things. This is the same thing, but simpler. So we'll just go do an example. HR comes to you like, hey, those Foster people, we moved them to all new offices. We need you to update their information in Active Directory. Can you do that? And you're like, okay, yeah, no problem. It's just 5 people. Yeah, but then everybody else is moving at the same time, so we're going to have to do this to 200 people. And you go, oh. PowerShell can save you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to take a CSV. So HR gave you a CSV. Let's just imagine that. So we have, here's Margaret, here's Foster, here's Margaret Foster, here's her username, here's her new office location, here's her phone number. I'm going to use each one as a separate example. So we need to get this data into Active Directory. And if you go, just so there's no magic around here. As you can see, there is no office location for Margaret or Maria right now, and there's no telephone number. So how do we get this data into PowerShell? Well, just like how we exported data, we can import data. We can say, I'm going to declare a variable. I'm going to call this Foster's because I've been doing or Foster's HR because I've been doing some testing. And I'm going to say Foster's HR is equal to import CSV. And I want to tell it the path to the CSV. And if you notice, I'm all about tab completion and up and down arrowing stuff because it's my workflow, and that's why I tend to use Ise more than Visual Studio Code because things are different. But now I can run this. And if I do CLS, which is clear host or clear screen, I can now look at the output of Foster's HR. Excuse me. And see, so we have 5 users. There's their office location. And you can see this is kind of similar to what we got from get AD user. It's just this is an object, and this is and the Foster's HR is an array of objects. So now let's go through each object and update the AD information. And for that, instead of using the traditional for loop, and we could totally do that, but it's an old style way of doing it. We can do what's called for each. And so we got to declare some stuff. So what do we want? So we're going to say the user. So for every user in Foster's HR, and this is arbitrary. You can say this is that person that you can have a $, this person I hate. What you can have this variable, whatever you can call it, whatever you want, as long as what it's going to do is it's going to, for every object in Foster's HR, it's going to set user to that first object, run through the loop, and then set user to the second object, run through the loop, set user to the third object, run through the loop. And I'll show that here. I'll show that. So we have for each, for every user in Foster HR, we're going to do a command. We're going to set AD user. We need to give it an identity. What user do we want to update? So luckily we have user principal name from that CSV file. So I'm going to just say user principal name. You'll probably have to type all that in manually the first time you ever run this, just because I have user object already in memory, so it kind of knows what the properties are. But just be able to look at this command and just know that I'm wanting to pull the user principal name of user, which is like it is eFoster, and for the last user, for the first object it's going to be mFoster, second object is going to be mFoster1, third object is going to be sFoster, and so on and so on and so on. And luckily for us, Microsoft has programmed a bunch of parameters into set AD user to fill in automatic, what we can use really easily. So we want to set the office location, right? So luckily there's a parameter for office, and now all we have to do is set user user office. This will work, I promise. And that's our for each loop. So now we've declared a variable, we imported data into the variable, and now we are looping through each object of that array from that variable, and we're setting whoever that user principal name, whatever their office to whatever it is in the CSV. So if I run this, I get an error message. You know, this worked in demo. Let's see. Really? I swear this worked in demo. Okay, well, that's a demo fail. I actually had it as a different format down here where I'm just going to manually set all of those 5 people to the same office location just for demo purposes. So now we have the Fosters, and now I'm just going to set each Foster to office location to the basement. That's done. If I go over here now and I look at mFoster, hey, look, now we have a basement. So yeah, other than the demo fail, if you were given a report like, hey, we need all of this information updated in Active Directory for these users, the way you do that is you use a for each loop. Again, you can do this via pipes. Again, I can take all the users whose last name is Foster, and then instead of for each, there's this pipe command called for each object. And just like before, we're going to set AD user to whatever that user object is that came in from the pipe, and we can set the office phone. Okay, 15 minutes left. We'll get through this, I promise. So set AD user. If I go back to the Foster1, hey, look, now the telephone number is set. So we've been through modules, we've been through pipes, we've been through loops. Those are 3. So I'm hoping we have enough time to go through the last 2. And to do that, we're going to jump over to Snmp. So again, this is for complete demo purposes. We'll just run with it. So imagine a scenario. I'm a network engineer and I want to use PowerShell to get the system name and description of every network card device on my network. Why am I using PowerShell? I don't know, but I am. So there's a module up in PowerShell Gallery called Posh Snmp. That's just there's like a dozen different SNMP modules up there. I just picked one. But what we're going to do is we're going to use that the commandlet in that module to pull the system name and the system description from a switch. In this case, I had to look this up ahead of time. I don't have time to go into details about it, but invoke SNMP get the object identifier. This is the OID for system name based on the standards. And then I'm going to hit IP address 2.1. That is a pfSense box here in this environment. The community name, the port number, which by default is 161 for SNMP, and I'm using SNMP version 2. If I run all of this, you see it returns the ID and the data. And that's the name of this pfSense box. In fact, there it is, pfSense.local domain matches this. Same thing for description. That's the OID for description. You can go look it up for SNMP. That's okay, great. So thing number 4 I want you to learn is how to create custom PowerShell objects. And what do I mean by that? I mean taking data like I want to take this name and I want to take this description and I want to put them into one object in PowerShell and be able to use that other places. So how do I do that? Well, this is step by step. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the name. I want to take that, I'm going to put that into SNMP name. I'm going to get the description, put that in SNMP description. And now I want to look at SNMP description, for example, same as you saw before, pfSense, blah, blah, blah. So here's the magic. You can do what's called create what's called a hash table. I never heard of hash tables before I started using PowerShell, but just know it's a table of keys and values. So for example, I want to build a hash table. I'm just going to break this out so you can see it better. I want to build a hash table with name. I want the SNMP data name because you see it's data. I only want that. So I'm just going to select that. Oh, I gotta do that. This is a bad demo, but yeah. So pfSense.local domain. I want to set the key called name to that value, and I want to set the key called description to the description value. Then what I'm going to do is I want to take that and I want to put that into a new PowerShell object, and that's what this line does. So new object, and my object type is PowerShell object, and then I want to take these properties and put them into that object. So when I do that, so I now have a hash table. There's my key name, and then there's the value of said key. I can now take that, and now look, I now have a PowerShell object. Why is it? This looks a little different, but it'll make sense in just a moment. So now I can do that, and now I have SNMP data. If I only want to see the name, I can do SNMP data name, or I can do description. I've learned over the time that when I'm pulling data from multiple places for like a given system, and I want to put it, and I want to be able to look at it all at once, normally what I do is I will create a new PowerShell object this way. So I can do name, description, I can put IP address in there, I can put whatever information I'm collecting about that object, I can put it all together in one hash table, put that into a variable, and then use that later on. So that's probably that might be a bit confusing, but we're going to take that to the next level. So if we're taking PowerShell objects, why don't we take what we did up here with invoke gets for name and description? Why don't we do this all? Why don't we kind of combine that all into one commandlet and make things simpler? So this is item number 5. I got 9 minutes. Okay, we're going for it. So what we're going to do is we're going to build a function. A function is a commandlet. A commandlet is a function. Let's just that's why those terms get used interchangeably. So let's create a function and let's call it get SNMP info. And as you know, like whenever you're doing down here, when you're doing get AD user, there's always, when you do dash, there's all these different parameters. Well, this is how you declare a parameter. So let's start with a really simple. Let's start with a bare function. So we're going to say function get Snmp Info. So we need to put some. We need some inputs. What do we want to do with this function? So we need some parameters. And then we're going to set the parameter name to, let's say, IP. And just for completeness, a lot of times you'll see we want this to be a string. So if I do get Snmp Info, now I can do get Snmp Info, and if I do tab, actually not working. Hang on, this works, I promise. There it goes. Okay, we're good. So now I can do 168.2.1, but nothing happens because I don't have anything happening in the function. So let's go back up here. Let's grab these two things. Let's go down here. Let's drop them in here. Let's do some tab complete, getting things formatted correctly. And so now let's replace this with IP. So whatever I typed, whatever comes into the function as IP will now be put here. And the same goes for here. All right, so then let's go back up here. Let's grab this. Go down here. Dump it there. And then finally, let's do write output Snmp data. So let's go through the steps of this function. We are going to, this function is going to ask for an IP address, and then it's going to take that IP address, go get the system name, go get the system description, take that data, put it into a hash table, take that hash table, put it into a new PowerShell object, and then return that PowerShell object. And if this demo works, we will have info IP 192.168.2.1. Look, the exact same data we did manually, we got back. We can do this for, this is like 1.1 is literally my home router. So we can say, hey, look, I'm running, my router's name is DDWRT and it's running DDWRT description. But then what we can do, now that we have a function, we can now take an array. Say you had a CSV file of IP addresses. You can then take that. I'm just going to, to be quick about it, I'm going to do this array of switches. So just, it's an array. And so I'm going to say switches for each, get Snmp info, $_ So look, hey, look, I now have the name and the IP address and the name and description of all that. And now I can output that to CSV and check that out. So I can import this into back into Excel and do data manipulation to it. If I wanted to go really crazy, go back up here. I'm going to say IP is equal to IP. So I just added another key and value to my hash table. So now when I run 1.1, now I get the IP address, the name, and the description. And I can go down here and I can output that to the CSV file. And look, there's my IP address, there's my name, and there's my description. So what I just did there was, again, I installed a module. I used this command list to pull data. I then took that data and put it into a hash table. So then I took that hash table, put it into a new PowerShell custom object. Took all that manual stuff, turned it into a function, and then took that function and used it as and piped IP addresses into it to get an output to Excel. So 5 things you need to learn how to do in PowerShell. There it is, all in one command, all in one file, all in one script. 4 minutes to go. I guess I'll leave it for Q&A. I was wanting to go through my group management stuff like I talked about. Basically, it's I have a group. I have a group of I have an OU. I have a group of computers, and I can do get the computers, get the group members. If computer is not in group, add to group. If computer is in group but not in OU, remove from OU. That's the basics about it. I will share it out with Leah so she can put it up on the website, and you can take it. You can check it out. So.
Thanks, Tony. So we have some questions here. Just so you know, since you took your content away, we just see you very big.
Hi.
I mean, you could leave it. Somebody wanted to know, Tony, is piping line FL the best way to get all the attributes?
FL star for visualizing it, yes. And for example, when you're in get AD user foster, sometimes, and again, if you go through and learn how to create modules, you can define how to present data to the console. The data is there in the background a lot of times in the object, but it's not presented to you, the person writing the code. So format FL, or that's an alias for format list. Well, and then format list, and then star is show me all the properties. Will show you more data that might be there. For example, if we look at mfoster here, there's a little bit more data in here, but not a lot. If you need to get more data out of the user AD object, I would suggest using properties, and then you can do stuff like physical delivery office name, which is a really long way of saying office. This is actually the attribute name that's on the AD object. But see, I can do properties, and now the office location is there. Or if you just want all the properties, you can do that. And now I've got all the properties of that user object. Don Jones says the reason this isn't the default is just for performance and memory, because it takes a lot of work for your AD server to do this, especially if you're pulling it from like 10,000 objects at once.
Cool. Michael Degnan wanted to know, is there a way to update what populates info in the dropdown for fields like the office that did not pull correctly?
Say that right. Read that again.
I'm not sure I'm following the question. Is there a way to update what populates info in the dropdown for fields like the office that did not pull correctly? Michael, if you're still here, can you send that in again or rephrase it so we can answer that for you?
Sure.
Roger wanted to know, Tony, do you ever work with files and folders in Windows PowerShell? I have trouble with long file names where PowerShell gives up after 256 characters in the past. Do you know a way around that?
I've not done that. Well, I have worked with files, but I've not gotten to the point of I've hit the 256 character limit. I'd have to research that. I'm sure there's a way around it. I just I've not experienced it myself to be able to debug.
And then we had a question from Bruce. Do you run into problems with numeric type conversions? I gave up on PS a couple of years ago because for my purposes, I had to deal a lot with unsigned 64-bit values. PS converted numerics to signed integers under the covers of all of the time and screwed everything up. Has this gotten any better? Can I set an explicit type on a variable and have it enforced over the life of a module yet?
You should be able to do that already. Whenever you do, I have not ran. I've never in my day-to-day work. I've never worked on unsigned versus signed integers. So I don't know about that. But whenever you're declaring variables, as if you're a traditional developer, like if you've worked in C# or like Node or TypeScript or whatever, you know that you can just declare a variable like I am a variable, and that variable can be a integer, it can be text and whatnot. And PowerShell just kind of figures it out as it goes. When you're declaring a variable, you can, I hit insert, didn't I? You can put, just like in .NET, you can put in like int as an integer. So text is going to be variable. It's going to, if I do this, it's going to fail. Like, hey, you can't put text in an integer 32 type object. So you can do that. Always declare that. But I'm guessing it's probably doing it on the changing unsigned to signed on the fly for you. There is one thing you might want to look into, and I just learned this while researching stuff. You can set PowerShell, at least PowerShell 7, to being strongly typed. It's something like I just found it. Just you can do a search for it. It's a session parameter. Kind of like how set execution policy is a session parameter. You can set the type for PowerShell to strong, and that might help you with your with PowerShell trying to convert your objects from one type to another.
Okay. I'm not sure if you answered Bruce's question. He had additional comments. The issue was really that having explicitly typecast every use of every instance of a variable in order to override the default conversion. I just want to declare the type of variable, not have to override it at every instance.
Yeah. Like I said, I don't know if strongly typing it will setting the environment to strongly type will fix that. Again, it's not something I've ever had to encounter myself. I've had to convert from one object type to another, but I've never had run into, an unsigned integer being converted to signed integer every time I wanted to use it.
He said strongly typed, yay.
I know that's a thing for people who are heavy developers. Strong type versus not strong typed, and that's just whether or not you have to declare a variable type to use it.
Okay, well, I don't have any more questions in the queue. Guys, if you want to go ahead and start typing, we're actually on a 20-second delay, Tony, so they're hearing us 20 seconds after we talk. So I'm going to just a few more, like a minute, if they feel like typing anything else, and then if we don't hear anything, we can start raffle.
Okay.
Is that so you can bleep out Tony if he says something bad?
I wish. I don't think they have this feature yet. I guess it's just all the clouds and satellites and things that this presentation's going through.
Great job, Tony.
Thanks.
Yeah, I'm not seeing anything else. So
we have no problem with demos that don't go quite as planned. But yours went great. So
Michael Degnan came back. He said, doing questions on mobile is tough because you can't type and see the box at the same time.
Oh, yeah.
In the case where he searched for Office to update the field, but I feel like sometimes the suggestions that ISE provides do not include the variables that I want to use. Didn't know if that was me or an ISE issue.
Oh, okay. So I think I understand the question. Like whenever, like when you're just typing stuff straight out, like I'm going to say this is a new variable, and then I like say I did this as an import equals import CSV of some kind, path, blah blah blah. So the first time you ever run this, that variable is not populated, so it doesn't know what the properties are of a given object. Also, if you have an array of objects, like for example, the Fosters, I think it's probably still in memory. So for example, Foster, if I run that, there's data here, so I could actually do Foster dot, do I see enabled or not? If you have an array of objects with properties, for example, Foster's, you're not going to get those properties. You can actually use them, and this is a big difference between C# and .NET. As I can do, if I know what the properties are, I can do enabled. But if you want to use the Foster's and you're trying to build out your for each loop and you're having trouble, here's what I do. I do for each, let's say a whole new variable, ASDF, and Foster's. So now I'm going to say set 80 user ASDF, and you can see there's nothing after that. So what I normally do is I will do Foster's, and then I'll get the first object of the array, and now I can actually get information I want. I want to set the office to whatever it needed to be. Again, I'm not quite sure why I failed on that. I think it's probably just I didn't test it enough. But then what I can do after that is I can go back here. I can take the Foster 0. I can do Control H to replace, and I'll just put in ASDF, and then I'll just go through and replace all the lines in that for each loop. That's one trick I've got, because I'll admit it, I'm kind of lazy on when it comes to typing stuff out. Not as lazy as Jeffrey Snover, whose all of his functions are like 1 character long names, and variables are all 1 character long. I'm not that lazy, but I'm getting there.
Okay, Tim Barrett wants to know, can you take 15 seconds to show the group out grid view?
Group out grid view. Sure. I don't really use it. So we'll see. Let's see. We'll use Foster's group. Honestly, I don't know all the syntax on it. And this is the thing, I don't know the syntax. If I don't know the syntax, I will do, oh, I bet I know it. Okay, group, and we're going to say surname out grid view. Maybe, oh yeah, I forgot about this. So this pops up and gives you a non-command line interface for looking at data. So what we just did there is we took the 5 users in the Fosters, and then let me go back and get this. We can do, let's do that. Let's get that. Put it in here. So again, what I'm doing is I'm getting all the users in our environment. I am grouping them based on last name, and then I'm outputting. I'm then outputting it to grid view, which was a new thing they added in, I guess, at least in a recent version of PowerShell.
Hey Tony, I think I read you the request wrong. I think they just want to see out grid view. I don't know. I'm getting a lot of people saying.
Okay. Well, again, this will show it off. So this is grid view. This gives you as the coder a nice visualization on data, and then you can add your own. You can add criteria like I only want to view less than or equal to 2. So now I only see all the last names that match. All the people with last names. They only have two people with that last name. So I honestly don't use grid view, so that's why I kind of forgot about it. But yeah, if for looking at data and being able to manipulate it really quick, it is a really cool feature.
Brian Henry said, I usually just run the for each loop empty to get the properties on the variable. Saves me from having to do the find replace in the loop. I think it was a comment from your last thing. Yeah,
that's another option too.
Someone else said, clever using the bracket 0 bracket to get properties. Yeah. I'm sorry if I'm reading these terms wrong.
No, that's fine. You're
good. Roger said group is alias for group-object, a handy way to condense your data.
Yeah. So yeah, if it is, I don't use it a lot for my day-to-day stuff, but Yeah, and if you go watch, like, definitely, like, the PowerShell Unplugged videos, go watch the one from 2016 Ignite. I was actually in the audience for that one, and Don Jones goes over a lot of these things, talking about, you know, your job is to do this job, and then it's also to grow your career and learn these new things. So once you've used a command, go read the help file and see what you don't know about it, because you'll learn something about it. You're like, I didn't know it could do that, and then you have that knowledge for the next time. He also goes into details about how you ever feel like there's 4 different ways to do the same thing in PowerShell? That's a feature. It's by design, so don't get mad at it. Just there's different ways to do the same thing, and they all have their own pros and cons.
Jordan Burns said the -what if switch is great for learning before you execute an action in a loop, especially when working with AD. Yes,
if you're going to do set AD user, I highly recommend you do what if first. In what if, it will tell you, it will output to the console what it was going to do. It's not going to do it, but it will tell you what it was going to do if that flag wasn't there. If you're writing, again, I keep going back to it. If you're writing your own functions, advanced functions, the PowerShell scripting in this book will teach you how to add what if, verbose, and debug flags to your own functions. And it's really simple. It's literally one line of code to add the functionality. And so if you're writing your own functions, I highly recommend you add that compatibility to it. Again, it's in the book. I keep harping on it. I really like this book. The new version, I haven't read it, but a lot of the same stuff is in it, and you will learn so much. And just like I said, it takes an hour of your time. If you just do it, that's all I can recommend.
Okay, Tim Barrett has a tip for the attendees. You can use out grid view to select objects manually. Get AD computer bar out grid view dash pass through bar reboot computer. I'm sorry, I have to read these to you guys. That will pop up a list of all computer objects in AD. Select the ones you want to reboot, then reboots the PC remotely. And just FYI, you guys, you can see all the public stuff in the Q&A. So when you write in a question, it goes to Craig and me privately, and we'll read it, and then we'll push it public so people can see it. Oh, look how big I am on the thing.
I'll move you off.
So yeah, if people are writing like little commands and stuff in there and you want to copy them, you can go into the Q&A panel and look at the comments.
Yeah, I've never done that with out grid view, but that's pretty awesome. Didn't know that.
Cool. I don't have anything else right now. Maybe give it another second since they're 20 seconds behind us. I should get like the Jeopardy theme to play when we wait. Okay.
Okay.
I don't see anything else, so we're going to go ahead and push towards our raffle drawing. So if you get further questions from Tony, is it okay if I give everybody your email address so they can
go for it?
You? Okay.
Go for it.
Is it Tony.Morrow?
No, it's A Morrow for Anthony.
Morrow.
AMORROW at Bellarmine.edu.
Reach out to Tony if you have more questions. He's being generous.
And be careful with your questions, because I will write you a novel back.
Oh, wait, we had one comment. It got pushed. Anyone using the Windows terminal? Josh Gatewood wants to know.
I've played with it. It's a novelty to me right now, because most of the time I'm using ISE or VS Code to do stuff. But yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting piece of technology, but for me right now, it's a novelty.
Okay. Well, just in the sake of time, and also because I'm getting hangry, I'm going to go ahead and start this raffle. But Tony's email is in the Q&A, you guys. So if you have further questions, he will generously assist you. So I am showing